A warm welcome to the community show here on Uxbridge FM. And it's a great pleasure to welcome back Bruce Houlder. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you again.
Now, a big story to tell, because last time you were here, you were telling us about your dream, as it were, your plans to create a database or a website for resources to do with knife crime.
That's right. It wasn't so much a dream because it was keeping me awake at night at that particular time. But it was something that I was absolutely determined to make a go of. And here we are a year or so later after that initial conversation with having got to the point where it's almost a reality. First of all, we had to create all the material which is going to form the background of the new website that we're going to launch, I hope, on June the 1st. But also we had to raise the large amount of money that is required, first of all, to build a really high-end website. And we've been very lucky in not only getting the money from private donors who have been extremely generous, but we've also got enough funds now to run that website for the first 3 years of operation.
Fantastic.
And that's without paying anybody at all. The only people we're paying are the web designers who are going to design this website, Iconic Media Solutions, who operate in Waterloo. And they're going to administer it for us for the first 3 years, as well as administering our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter and so on.
So just going back a few years, for anybody that didn't watch that first video, you were a QC, a criminal barrister, for a number of years, 30-something years?
Over 50 years, 51 years.
51
I've been
years.
practicing law.
Okay.
And I retired in May last year.
So I would guess you've seen some pretty horrific scenes and met some pretty interesting people.
My life was in the criminal law, and I probably saw every form of human degradation and tragedy in the course of my career. But being a criminal lawyer is a somewhat vicarious experience, although you read, hear and learn from eyewitnesses all about these events. You're not actually in the midst of them. You're actually looking at the aftermath, the effect it's had on the lives of those who you've called into the witness box to speak about these events. And that obviously leaves its mark. On a day-to-day basis, you have to leave all that kind of stuff behind. Otherwise, you'll never be able to do your next day's work. But when you stop, what do you do then? You've seen all this tragedy. You understand it. You understand something about the causes. But then you look around and say, well, could we do better? And I got to the age when I wasn't going to be able to get down and dirty with the young and work with them at a close level, as I perhaps did many years ago. What I had to do was something rather different, and that's what gave me the idea for this website. Obviously,
Knife crime is something that touches many areas, but particularly in Hillingdon here, we've had some awful knife crime incidents, and I'm sure many boroughs in London are the same. So it's great that you've put together this resource. And then give us a bit of a background about who the funders are and who the supporters are and how it all came together.
Well, I'm not going to betray the identity of the funders because practically all of them have asked to remain anonymous, but they're all private individuals, or in one case a private fund that have donated a very considerable amount of money to us, and they don't wish to make a thing about the fact that they've lent this money, because obviously they like to pick and choose who they give their funds to and don't want to be chased all over Europe by people who are looking for funds for similar kind. But one thing we're going to do on our website is host the sort of funders that people can make application to who are engaged in community work of this kind.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of organisations out there that are willing provided you meet the criteria, to consider quite large funding opportunities for such organisations. And so we're going to list them along with all else that we hope to list.
And what kind of things would you be applying for funding to do? Are we talking youth clubs or education?
I won't be applying for funding. That's not the purpose of the website. The funding that we required was the funding to design and be able to run that website and its other online presences for the first 3 years of operation. Because we are, as it were, a host of hundreds of organisations operating within the Greater London area from every aspect that feeds in to improving the lives of young people. You start at street level, the community groups that really engage closely working with young people. They're not just youth organisations, they are so much more than that. They join together to combine to help young people in all sorts of ways. There are arts organisations, sports organisations, mental health groups, people who just provide a safe place for someone to go and talk about their problems that they are facing. Businesses who operate in central London with a particular mission to help young people into employment because they understand the tragedy that may befall these young people if they're not given that opportunity. Most of the London Premiership clubs now are engaged together and work together through an organisation called London United to provide opportunities within communities to assist people out of their circumstances. Mental health groups, mentoring organisations, just about everything that you can think of feeding in to help young people. Fantastic. So this is a place for everyone to go. It's not just people looking for help. It's people who want to give help.
Why do you think there is this thing still of people carrying knives in London? I mean, what age does it start from? Are we talking really young people here?
Yes, well, I mean, there is evidence that it can start very young indeed, the age of 8. And, you do hear stories of people being drawn in to county lines at an extremely young age. If they have no strong family behind them, they look to people slightly older than themselves to find that measure of self-worth, which of course very soon turns to dust, and it becomes a terrible prison to find yourself in as a young person with hopes and aspirations, because you've got one end of society trying to drag you out and this other end trying to drag you back in, and eventually what starts pleasantly can turn very nasty indeed and very violent. And we all know the stories of young people who are literally forced to use the knives that are placed in their hands. So they may start carrying knives for self-protection, which of course is a disastrous mistake, but when they got used to that, they might very soon find themselves being forced to demonstrate their preparedness to use that knife against perhaps another member of another gang or something of that kind. And they haven't got necessarily the emotional ability at that age to understand what it is that they're being drawn into, or to have the tools to resist it. And that's what we need to strengthen.
Yeah, it's almost too late. Once there's a crime committed and police get involved, you need to be catching these people much, much earlier with education and that kind of thing, don't we? I suppose lockdown hasn't helped last year. Youth clubs and things would have been closed, but hopefully we're going to be opening those again shortly.
Well, it's never too late, and one must never despair. First of all, I think that there is always hope, and there are people with extremely strong self-will prepared to give their time to help young people on a one-to-one basis and to go to enormous lengths to try to extract them from the difficulties in which they find themselves. And I think that if people work together, organisations talk to each other, try to understand that they can actually improve the offer that they are making to young people by listening to other people and working with other organizations, then there is some hope. There have been all sorts of studies into knife crime. A new one comes out every couple of months or so. We'll put those reports up on our website so people can see them. But in fact, there is no single solution that is capable of solving this problem. It has to start at community level. It is the responsibility of government to provide funding for those organizations that are actually doing the work. They're doing the work for nothing, most of these organizations, but they do have some expenses, and it is the responsibility of government to give them the maximum help and guidance that they can. The police do everything that they can, but it's not always easy, is it, for the police to find a way to work with young people.
No.
They do make an effort, but it's not always successful as perhaps it should be.
No. So FightingKnifeCrime.London is the website, and organisations in London boroughs can apply. Look on there for funding sources and information, which is fantastic. It's a lovely legacy, I think, isn't it, for someone who's finished their career, done how many, 50 years you were saying?
Yeah,
in the
51 years in all. Yeah,
it's great to do something like this. That's a kind of a sort of payback or giving back to society. I think that's fantastic.
Well, it's something that you become very passionate about. There was a sort of worm eating in my head. This all started actually over a supper with two people who've done a heck of a lot more than I've ever done in my life towards helping young people. One was a teacher who had turned round a particularly difficult school in a particular area in London and really understood kids, how to motivate them, how to change their lives around. And the other was the chairman of the Desmond Tutu Foundation, who has done a lot of work in this area. And indeed, we've worked with them here in London Borough of Hillingdon, trying to get what is called their Ubuntu Round Table program off the ground. I spoke about that, I think, last time we met.
Yeah.
But those kinds of people, we had supper together, the three of us, and by the end of that evening, I decided that there was something that I had to do, because here were these great people that had done so much with their lives. I now had the time. And that night, I say I didn't sleep. But by the morning, I had a plan, and I put it on paper, and I wrote to one or two people with the plan just to try to improve it a bit and to see whether they thought it was a good idea. And with their encouragement and the huge encouragement of the people that they introduced me to thereafter, I've been able to get this going. And through this whole process, the last 15 months, I've had so many conversations, mostly on Zoom, unfortunately, or Teams, with people who have worked all of their lives with young people that really understand these issues. And those conversations have not only educated me, but spurred me on by the selflessness of their own lives to try to help and to bring these organizations together so that they can talk in a public space and find solutions for each other.
Great. And you've managed to sort out your Zoom background okay. Not turn it into a potato, which one of the humorous things we saw recently in America.
I had to give a particular interview last week, which for one reason or another required a courtroom in the background, and I can't get rid of the courtroom now.
Oh, no.
I've tried to get rid of that for over 51 years, but it's still there.
There's worse things, I suppose, aren't there? Well, Bruce, thanks for coming in and telling us about this fantastic new resource, FightingKnifeCrime.London. Opening or launching in June, isn't it? It's not quite up yet, but launching in June. Fantastic resource for people to go and check out about knife crime solutions in London.
Steve, thank you very much for giving me the time.
No worries.